You're listening to the 2 Cents Podcast by Salary Transparent Street. This week, we're back at the Capital One Cafe filming our podcast and live webinars. Join us on Instagram Live on Wednesday, May 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern to get our 2 cents on questions you have about money, careers, and more. And you don't need to be a Capital One cardholder to join in on the fun. Redeem a free handcrafted beverage at the cafe using our coffee card in the description below. We'll see you there. Now back to the episode. How much have you made as a ghostwriter? Like, what have your worst and best years looked like?
Yeah, let's get into it. Where to begin? So,
hello, and welcome back to the 2 Cents Podcast. I'm Hannah.
And I'm James.
And today we are joined by an amazing writer who also wrote our newsletter for almost 2 years, the amazing Alice Lemee. Thank you for joining us, Alice.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Very excited.
We were going to meet you in New York in person, but our train got canceled. So we're going to try to do this virtual interview and hopefully it works out okay. But Alice, the first thing that I think everyone wants to learn from you is a little bit of who you are. Where are you based? How old are you? And what do you do for a living in a couple sentences? What does being a remote writer mean?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I'm Elise. I'm 28 years old. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I am a ghostwriter and digital writing coach. That's what I do for a living. And that can sound a little bit nebulous, but basically I do writing, consulting, positioning, messaging, and a bunch of little stuff in between for creators and people of all different types of audiences.
I love it. How did you get into writing? Did you study it in school? What's your background in writing?
Yeah, actually non-existent. Which hopefully to somebody listening can be encouraging, but I never went to school for any type of writing, journalism school. Actually, the only creative writing class I took, I got demolished by my professor. So not a great sign to start off of. But I was always the type of kid who just loved to write. I had journals ever since I was 6. And remember asking my mom if I could become a writer, but if it meant that I had to write books, which I wasn't sure I wanted to do.
That's a long commitment.
I was like, I don't know if I have it in me to write a Twilight saga. And that's all I knew because I was like 13 reading Twilight, which is a world memory.
Same.
Yeah, so no, I had no experience whatsoever and then like entirely self-taught. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So then how long have you been ghostwriting and how did you get your first gig?
Yeah, so I have been doing this for 4.5 years now. So I started around October 2020 professionally. So I got my first client through a very weird series of events, but essentially I was facing the catch-22 of how do I get experience if nobody's willing to hire me. Luckily with writing, you can write on the internet and publish and see what happens. And I published this piece about this multi-level marketing scheme called Breakaway Movement. And what these people do is that they sell these Japanese water filters at $5,000 a pop, and they are excellent at branding. They basically have like the Instagram makeover where you see these girls frolicking in Hawaii and Bali and preaching this sustainable lifestyle and remote freedom. And I was very intrigued by this because I knew it was too good to be true. So long story short, I did some investigating, found out that it was a pyramid scheme, wrote this article, posted about it, and somebody found me through that article and was like, I liked your voice. It was pithy. It was fun. We're kind of looking for somebody with that voice. Would you be interested in writing with us? And that was my first ever gig, which was mind-boggling. But that's
awesome.
That's amazing. That's great.
Do you remember where you posted the blog at? Like, was this MySpace or Tumblr days or Twitter?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, no, it was on Medium, which was back in 2020 was huge because pandemic and people were just Medium back then was big. It had a lot of publications. You could submit your articles there, and I actually didn't even get into a publication because I was brand new. I just posted it and it just made its way through the internet, and that's how he found me. So yeah.
Cool.
Crazy.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's what Substack is seemingly doing now. And you have a Substack. We'll definitely give you the opportunity to shout out all your amazing resources towards the end. But getting towards the, amazing part that you're at now. So you've been doing this 4.5 years. How does a remote writer or ghostwriter make money? It might seem like a really obvious thing to you and to me, but some people maybe they need to break it down into like, are you doing contracts? How long are those contracts? Like, what does it look like to make money as a ghostwriter?
Yeah, totally. So there are many, many ways you can make money as a writer, and I have done almost all of them. I have written articles that go on blogs. I have written newsletters. I have written case studies. I have done ghostwriting for LinkedIn, for Twitter. I have done landing pages and copywriting. There are a lot of different specialties you can go in. In terms of contracts and retainers, typically I do retainer contracts. So this is when we have like a month-to-month agreement with a minimum of 3 to 5 months, depending on the nature of the engagement. And these are really the bread and butter of most freelance businesses because it is consistent, reliable income, which is really valuable in an industry that can otherwise be a little volatile. So having those I started having retainer contracts right off the gate because I hired a coach when I first started freelancing in 2020, and she was very adamant about retainers. And I'm very thankful for her because I was able to create some relatively crazy income right off the gate. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that leads me to my next question. So with that, all of these different forms of writing, which one is the most lucrative? I know that's what everybody's wondering.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, it's not the perfect answer. It depends. It depends on the industry, but it really, above all, boils down to the ROI that you were able to provide, right? So for case studies, for instance, I have charged upwards of $1,000 for a single 1,000 word case study. And the reason for that is that if somebody reads your case study, well, actually, I'll give you a real life example. I work with an influencer marketing agency, wrote this case study for $1,000 something. This case study went onto their website. One brand found the case study and wanted to work with the agency based on this case study. And that deal was north of 25 to 50 to 100K. They were still like managing it. When you put it this way, $1,000 is like a drop in the bucket for the potential ROI that you have, So case studies is one of them. Additionally, copywriting for landing pages can be super lucrative because, again, right, like if you're selling a $100 product and your landing page is able to increase conversions from 2% to 5%, I can't do it off the top of my head, but you can see how that able to like also add, a pretty discernible money on top of that. So that's also one. Additionally, ghostwriting for founders, executives, CEOs. These people are really pressed for time, and they also tend to have the resources to be able to afford high quality writing. A lot of these people really value their time. They value their expertise. They are not going to want to work with somebody who's charging peanuts. It's going to make them feel uncomfortable. So again, you have the option to be able to charge higher than what you would usually do in this sphere. And the last thing I'll say is typically the people that I see who do really well in this career, who earn good money from it, they don't position themselves as just a freelance writer. Typically you see them as a strategic partner, as a advisor. They help, spearhead growth initiatives. They're in the conversations with the marketing team, helping grow these businesses. They're not just taking orders. They're also using and leveraging their expertise to help these companies.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that makes sense. You want the writer to have a, seat at the table and understanding what's going on and being able to share their input versus completely ghostwriting and just having to take direction. It's not going to come out in the right voice or in the right tone. So that makes a lot of sense. I love that you can use that as leverage to ask for more because you're bringing more to the table as well, which leads us, I guess, to the big question. How much have you made as a ghostwriter? Like, what have your worst and best years looked like? And what is a realistic annual income that somebody starting off can expect to make doing this?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, let's get into it. Where to begin? So the past 4.5 years, as I briefly mentioned, I've done a lot of different types of writing. And as you start off, you're kind of figuring out like, what's my niche? What am I good at? What do I enjoy? And this is a process of trial and error, especially as you figure out like what contracts work best for me. How do I avoid getting screwed over? And the first year is really the biggest learning curve. So with that, over the past 4 years, I have made over $271,000. It sounds crazy, but let's break it down because that sounds like a lot, but it's spread over 4 years. So I broke down the numbers. The first year I made 48,000. The second year I made it 65. The third year I made 86. And then the fourth year I actually took a dip and went to 72,000. So I'm currently in my fifth year, and it's too early to say what this year is going to shape out financially, but so far I'm projected to have my highest year yet. But that depends on how the next month will go. So fingers crossed. We will see.
Yes, fingers crossed for you. And are those numbers, I'm just curious, I know some people really have nitty gritty, they want to get to the nitty gritty. And one of the things that I'm anticipating they'll ask is, are those numbers before taxes or after taxes, gross or net?
Yes. So these numbers are before tax. So huge asterisk, because taxes in New York City, we're talking like almost 30%. My accountant is not cheap. There's a lot of expenses that go into this. So definitely, again, that number 271 sounds incredible, but it's definitely important to remember that also a lot of this money goes into reinvesting in the business, and there's a lot that goes into it.
What are some of the hidden costs that people don't think comes with, writing?
Yeah, you mentioned having an accountant. I'm sure there's like, the personal branding and being self-employed that comes into it. You have to pay for your own insurance.
Yes, I will say this is something I'm very jealous of my 9-to-5 friends. I have never known the life of a paid time off. That sounds like magical to me. But yes, okay, so there's a lot of things to consider. First and foremost, setting up an LLC costs like a couple $100s. I forget the cost. It might be less, might be more, but I remember that's an investment.
Yeah, definitely at least $100.
Something like that, yeah. I work with an accountant. I pay too much for my accountant. I am looking for a new one. So if any accountants are watching this, hit me up. But the only time I did my taxes by myself, I got contacted by the IRS for identity fraud, possibly. That's how bad I did them. Wow. So I don't do my taxes.
Yeah, I'd be so scared.
It was scary. Luckily, the IRS are actually really nice people, but that was just like, it took way too much of my time. So now I pay for an accountant. Of course, as you mentioned, insurance is one of the major downsides. I don't have health insurance. I have to pay for it out of pocket. With the New York market, it offers subsidies. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I pay $373 right now per month. And if I'm correct, that insurance doesn't include vision or dental. So I have literally gone to dentist appointments on Groupon, which is suspicious, but it worked. And I've done, like if I have family in France, I'm French. When I go there, I will do a lot of doctor's appointments there because it's just so much more affordable. So that's a cost to consider. And then there's also just the teeny tiny subscriptions, so many things like run the business, for instance, like my email. It's not an @Gmail account, it's a domain. And you also pay for the website, and then you pay for Squarespace and the provider. You also pay for, the tools like Veed or CapCut. And I don't know, there's so many of them. But just tiny subscriptions that add up over time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's always those things that you have to consider.
So now we've covered, a lot of the hidden costs. Being a freelance, you get to have all of these perks that regular 9-to-5s don't have. Like we heard that you recently went to Bali. What are some of those perks, and like how is it being able to travel all the time?
Yeah. Is it realistic for somebody who wants to do this to can they actually live in Bali for a year and just work from their laptop? Is that a real thing?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I was one of those people, and I've met many, many of those people in Bali who did that. So yeah, 100%. It's a reality. It's a possibility. I was there for 4 months in 2024. And it was a very eye-opening experience. It was not the first country that I worked remotely in. One of the major reasons for starting this business was to have that freedom. And I've been extremely lucky and privileged to be able to work from so many amazing places, like France and Portugal and Brazil. And it's just been like one of the most amazing experiences. That said, it does come with significant downsides, especially if you have clients based in a, EST time zone and you are working in an Asian time zone. It's very different. So some of the downsides there are just in terms of scheduling calls. We're talking calls at 5, 6 a.m. or 9, 10 p.m. You also just get terrible sleep because you stay up late to make sure that messages are answered. And then you wake up early in a panic, usually, to make sure that you didn't miss anything while you were sleeping. My sleep was garbage out there. It was not good. A lot of these places that are, like by the sea and have a culture of like surfing and, all of this, they're not really work focused, which is fine. Life is not all work. But it's important for you to assess where you are in your career and what you want. I also say this as somebody who's based in New York City. In terms of career opportunities and networking and all of that, there's a huge advantage to being in the epicenter of that all. And Bali is more so for kind of like, influencers and crypto people and life coaches, which is not an industry, not industries that I was interested in pursuing. So for my business, it didn't really make a lot of sense to invest those roots there. And then additionally, we also can't, forget that this is like a country that you are a guest. And I wrote an entire article on this, but there's, like a lot of qualms on balancing being a digital nomad in a country where almost like I think it's around 70% of its GDP is reliant on tourism. It creates a very unbalanced dynamic. And I was starting to just feel uncomfortable about whether my presence was actually helping for people. So I wrote more about this. I won't go into it now, but there's just a lot of factors to consider when it comes to moving and doing those things remotely. And the last thing I'll say too is that in terms of building roots and friendships when you are traveling, no matter where you are in the world, those relationships tend to be very transient. Because people are always on the go. They're not really tethered to one place. I met people who were like, I don't really have family at home. I have no reason to ever be back. And that is, it's a case where you just want to be grateful for like having roots and family. And I think as you get older, you start to really value that. And in terms of the business growth tends to get better when you have stability.
Wow, that's such an important perspective to share and really good notes. Anybody listening, like take notes. This is important to consider because there are always those trade-offs. Yeah, you can live by the beach, but it's important to understand, community and the long term, what are the goals and what are the outcomes. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm curious, actually, kind of going along that line. Did you have any pushback from your family or your loved ones or friends? If you had friends that were going the traditional route, 4-year college, 9 to 5, how did you handle any potential pushback? How have you made it easier for your family to understand, when dad's trying to explain to grandma what you do for a living, how have you handled that dynamic?
Yeah, so my grandparents still have no idea what I do, which is fine.
Same.
We're all still so French and like 80 something. It's just not going to happen to be able to explain this to them. But they're supportive. I mean, I'm very lucky to be very supported by my friends and family. I will say in the beginning when I was contemplating starting this business, I didn't really know what direction to go in. My mom was definitely an advocate for me to get a real job. And this was a pressure that I faced a lot, especially as, when you graduate college, you tend to be around like 21, 22-ish. You've spent your whole life in these structured education systems. And for some 20-something-year-olds, all they want to do is just like chill. They want to travel. They want to explore. They don't think about work right now. And that's definitely where I was at. And I took a 6-month backpacking trip around Southeast Asia. And that was one of the best decisions I've ever done in my life. But my parents, they were like, okay, wrap it up. It's time for you to get back to the work. And I remember, like facing a lot of anxiety and doubt about that. Like, what if I, have spent these 2 years traveling? Is my resume going to be, messed up forever? Will an employer never want to hear from me again because I had this gap? And really like just understanding that ever since being freelance and starting this, no one's ever asked me for my resume. And if anything, especially for writers, one of your strong suits is having, quote unquote, more like an interesting life where you're full of experiences. You don't have to travel to do that, but just following your intuition and carving out your own path is helpful. So yeah, I just like remember telling my mom at one point, I was like, you need to know I'm not going to have a normal job. And she accepted that. And now she knows what I do. She reads my newsletters and she's thankfully very supportive. Yeah.
Oh, that's all we can ask. Just subscribe to the newsletter. You don't even have to read it. Just subscribe.
No, I will not even be like, if she reads it, I'm like, you didn't have to do that. But
yeah, you didn't have to. On the opposite, I tell him, I'm like, yeah, we wrote it. You still have to open it. You still have to click it. So you're a ghostwriter. I'd like to know your 2 cents on AI. Not to make things dark or anything, but do you think that AI is going to replace writers? Are you worried about it? What are your 2 cents?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't think any writer hasn't thought about it. AI is scary good, and if it's this good now, it's going to get even better. So in terms of like where this leaves us, I still think that writers are necessary. I don't think they're going to go extinct. I mean, where do we get? A ghostwriter, for instance, you have a CEO, an executive. It's a lot more enticing, the idea of having somebody on a call, listening to you, asking you questions, having that human interaction than just a CEO like talking into ChatGPT. There's kind of like that element that's still, we have an upper hand on that. Additionally, ChatGPT or Claude, these AI tools, like I use some of them for certain parts of my writing, specifically kind of at the very end for hardcore editing, sometimes to help me generate ideas. At the same time, when you work with these LLMs, you have a lot of choices to make, right? There's an element of taste involved. I want this word, I don't want this. And that requires you to have an understanding of like, what is good writing? What do you enjoy? Why do you think this sentence belongs there? And why does it not? And that means that your strong suit will be developing a strong sense of self and taste, usually done through consuming, high quality authors, reading a lot. I think that will be a big upper hand. And additionally, as I said before, being somebody who has these stories and experiences, this is going to help differentiate yourself. AI can never can't live a life like you can. And then, the last thing I'll say, which hopefully is helpful because it's more like a tactical example, but so like I said kind of earlier about like, you're not just a freelance writer, you need to position yourself a little bit higher. So for instance, one of my clients is a newsletter client. I help write their newsletter. And, you could think with AI, well, AI can just write your newsletter. And to that I say potentially, right? But if let's say, part of my tasks is like optimization and growth of the newsletter. So something that, I helped suggest was like, okay, why don't we, like the year anniversary of this newsletter is coming up. Let's do a survey. Let's give a giveaway. So we like incentivize people to, talk to us, to tell us what they want, tell us what they don't want. Let's like collect all this data. So, as a writer, I'm responsible for like putting up the survey, sending this out, doing the automations, like writing, ideating, everything. And then we get hundreds and hundreds of responses. And I use AI to gather those responses and analyze them for me. So it's like, what recurring trends are you seeing? What words should I use in my copy going forward that these people are saying a lot so I can, mimic this audience? So this is where AI is super useful and should not be discarded. But that whole earlier process of like having a seat at the table, pitching this idea, deploying it, this is where you're going to be able to differentiate yourself and have an upper hand on AI.
Wow, that was a great answer. Love it. Sorry, I know I didn't send that to you ahead of time, so I hope I didn't put you on the spot, but I was like, oh my gosh, we have to ask her about AI.
I wrote it in my notes. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if I was asked about AI. So I got you.
You were prepped. So to wrap this up, Elise, can you share your best tips for people listening who are interested in remote writing or writing in general? What advice would you share with them to either maximize their income, increase, the gigs that they get or their clients, or have a better chance of capturing those clients? Anything that you've done in the last 4.5 years that you think would be helpful for people listening?
Gosh, there's so many things you could do. I'll try and think of just a few off the top of my head that could be useful. One, it goes without saying that your network, your referral engine is the most important thing you could be working on. I mean, I think about the clients I've worked with. I mean, you, Hannah, like this was a referral that, I happened to know the people that you were in contact with. Like this was this was a situation where I didn't even have to technically apply because we just were connected through the grapevine. And a lot of my other clients are like that. So even though networking might make you want to gag, it's not about being social climby. It's just about finding your people and being helpful. So, send messages, connect with people, don't ask for anything, just form connections and be genuinely interested in what people are creating. Retainers are really important. This is going to help you get consistent. Having clauses in those retainers that protect your time is also very important. Something like a ghost clause, which if a client pays you 50% and then disappears, which actually happens a lot, like way more than you. I have had many times clients pay me upfront and then they just disappear. And sometimes they never come back, but the retainer usually has a clause that's like, if you disappear and you come back 3 months later and you say, I'm ready, you have to pay extra for that because I retained my hours for you at the original time. You didn't honor that agreement. And as a business, I have to keep going. So I can't wait for you. So you come to me 3 months later, I already have a full roster. So that's communicated up front to help protect, that time and avoid any losses. And then, like, as I was saying earlier, like position yourself as an expert. Don't wait around to take orders. Pitch things, suggest things, like really position yourself as somebody who can help and offer these ideas. It's more work for a client to tell you what to do. They want you to handle things. So try and position yourself and be active. And the last thing I'll say, especially for people who are brand new and have no idea how to break into the field, is you do not wait for anybody to give you a chance to get started. You start right now. And you can do that through posting and writing online. Like open a Substack, open a Medium. It's going to be hard. The first couple of articles you write are going to be garbage. Trust me, you can look at my articles from 2020. Writing is really bad, but this is how you get started. And I mean, I think about those first clients that I got. It was all through those articles. It was all through cold pitching them and saying like, hey, I've written before. Here's a link to my article. You can check it out. And that was how I was able to like get the flywheel going. So don't wait for anybody. Just start creating, start posting, start writing. And if you have that initiative, then the world it'll reward you for that. So that's the biggest piece of advice I can give.
I love that.
Yeah,
that was excellent.
That sounds like some wonderful advice. I mean, it sounds pretty similar to a lot of the advice that we give people when it comes to social media because, it's pretty much just that getting started portion that everybody struggles with.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes people wait for permission to get started or permission to, achieve whatever they dream of. But really, you just have to go do it yourself and put it out there. And eventually, people will catch up to it, just like the writing. Like they'll find you on Substack.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say too is like, I've had my fair share of rejections. I've applied to fellowships at BuzzFeed and Vox and all the media publications, and I got rejected from every single one, and also after 4-ish years, I still get rejected from things all the time, but like, you can't let that. I think the people who are going to really succeed in this space or any field look at rejections and they just have a with or without you energy. It doesn't matter whether you back me or not. It doesn't matter whether you publish my piece or not. I'm going to get to where I want to go. You can either join me along for the ride or not, and I'll see you at the top. Like
I love that. That's that confidence. I love to hear. That's a great way actually to wrap. Where can people find you if they want to either follow your journey or if they want to work with you or if they want to read your writing? Where are all the places that we can find you?
Yeah, totally. So I'm mainly on 3 platforms. First is my website, alicelemee.com, but my name is spelled like Alice, so ALICE. I also have my Substack, which is called Internetly. So I publish more about writing, freelancing, and specifically how to build what I call your creator gravity, which is like that magnetic force field around your online world that pulls in opportunities such as writing gigs, podcast interviews, all that stuff. And then I also have my LinkedIn, which is just my first and last name. And I also post musings on there.
Yeah, I was definitely going to shout out your LinkedIn because I love your creator takeaways, your writing takeaways. Like, I'm not a writer. I hate writing. I'm terrible at it, but I read it because I think it's really interesting. And there's always something to be learned, especially from a writer. Like, you share the story. So I think everybody can learn something from you because you're really the one sharing it with the world. So thank you so much for all your insights in this interview. This was really interesting. I learned so much about remote writing.
Yeah, I did as well.
Yeah, we really value your time, Elise. And we're going to link all of that below in the description too if you're listening or watching so you can connect with Elise as well. And thank you so much, Elise, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Of course, anytime, my pleasure.